July 3, 1977. Rapid City Civic Center, South Dakota. 8,000 screaming fans packed into a venue that feels too small to contain the legend standing center stage. Elvis Presley, 42 years old, sweat pouring down his face under the blazing lights, his white jumpsuit straining against a body that's betraying him night after night. But something's different about this performance, something that will haunt the final 42 days of his life. Elvis is midway through Love Me Tender when his eyes lock onto something in the front row that makes him freeze. His voice cracks. His hands start shaking, not from the pills this time, not from exhaustion, but from 5 words written on a piece of cardboard held by a 19-year-old girl with tears streaming down her face. For Gladys's son. The music stops. 8,000 people fall silent. Elvis walks to the edge of the stage, his breathing heavy, his eyes fixed on this young woman like she's holding the key to everything he's lost. Without a word, he extends his hand and pulls her onto the stage. Her name is Sarah Mitchell. She's driven 600 miles from Nebraska with a secret that's been eating her family alive for 19 years. A secret about the night Gladys Presley died. A secret about the real reason Elvis lost his mother. Sarah leans close to Elvis's ear. What she whispers takes exactly 7 seconds to say, but those 7 seconds shatter everything Elvis thought he knew about the most important person in his life. For the first time in his career, Elvis Presley breaks down crying in front of thousands of people. Not the controlled emotion of a practiced performer, but raw, devastating sobs that echo through the arena like a wounded animal. The crowd doesn't know whether to cheer or pray. Elvis doesn't finish the concert that night. He can't. Because what Sarah Mitchell whispered to him revealed a truth so devastating that it would consume every moment of his remaining time on Earth. A truth about addiction, about lies, about a mother's final words that his own father had stolen from him. The truth about how Gladys Presley really died. To understand why 7 whispered words could destroy Elvis Presley, you have to go back to August 14, 1958. The day Elvis's world ended for the first time. Private Presley was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, serving his country like any other young man when the phone call came. Gladys Presley, just 46 years old, had been rushed to Methodist Hospital in Memphis. Heart failure, they said, complications from hepatitis. Come home now. Elvis had always been a mama's boy, but calling it that makes it sound simple. What Elvis had with Gladys wasn't simple. It was everything. She was his protector, his confidant, his biggest fan before the world knew his name. They had their own language, their own jokes, their own way of communicating that didn't require words. When Gladys was pregnant with Elvis, she lost his twin brother Jesse at birth. From that moment, she poured all the love meant for 2 children into one. Elvis wasn't just her son, he was her miracle, her second chance, her reason for breathing. And Elvis knew it. Even as a grown man, he called her every day when he was on the road, sent her flowers from every city, made sure she had everything she could ever want because Gladys Presley had given up everything to make sure her son could chase his dreams. But by 1958, something was wrong. Elvis could hear it in her voice during their phone calls, a tiredness that went beyond physical exhaustion, a sadness she couldn't quite hide even when she was telling him how proud she was of his success. "Something's eating at Mama," Elvis told his army buddies. "She won't tell me what, but I can feel it." What Elvis didn't know was that Gladys was fighting her own private war. The fame that had lifted her son to unimaginable heights had become her prison. Death threats arrived daily. Fans camped outside their Memphis home, going through their garbage, stealing anything they could find. Gladys couldn't leave the house without being mobbed, couldn't live a normal life, couldn't even grieve the quiet existence she'd lost. But she never complained. Not to Elvis, because Gladys Presley understood that her son's happiness was built on believing she was living her dream too. The pressure was killing her slowly, and like so many people drowning in problems they can't solve, Gladys found help in a little brown bottle prescribed by a doctor who promised it would make everything better. Diet pills, amphetamines, the same family of drugs that would eventually destroy her son. Vernon Presley knew about the pills. He'd been the one driving Gladys to Dr. Charles Clark's office every week, watching her collect prescriptions that seemed to multiply rather than solve her problems. But Vernon was dealing with his own guilt about how fame had changed their lives, his own fear that speaking up might somehow threaten the golden goose that Elvis had become. So Vernon said nothing, and Gladys took more pills. By July 1958, Gladys was taking enough amphetamines to keep 3 people awake for days. She'd lost weight, lost sleep, lost the ability to distinguish between what her body needed and what the pills were telling her she needed. Her heart was racing constantly. Her liver was failing. Her mind was fracturing under the strain of chemicals and isolation. But when Elvis called from Fort Hood, Gladys summoned every ounce of strength to sound like the mother he remembered. Strong, supportive, proud, the voice he needed to hear to keep going. "I'm fine, baby," she'd tell him. "Don't you worry about your mama, just take care of yourself." It was the last lie she'd ever tell him. On August 9, 1958, Gladys collapsed in the Graceland kitchen. Vernon found her unconscious, surrounded by spilled pills and the kind of desperate mess that comes when someone realizes they're dying and tries to save themselves too late. At Methodist Hospital, Dr. Clark, the same doctor who'd been feeding Gladys amphetamines for months, suddenly became very interested in protecting his reputation. The official cause of death became acute hepatitis, with heart failure as a contributing factor. No mention of the drugs that had actually stopped her heart. No investigation into the prescriptions that had killed Elvis Presley's mother. Vernon went along with it, partly to protect the family's reputation, partly to protect his own guilt, and partly because he genuinely believed the truth would destroy Elvis. When Elvis arrived at the hospital, still in his army uniform, Vernon took his son aside and delivered the news in the way he thought would be easiest to bear. "She died of heart problems, son. The hepatitis weakened her and her heart just gave out. She didn't suffer, she went peaceful." Elvis collapsed against the hospital wall and cried like the world was ending, because for him it was. But what Vernon didn't tell Elvis, what no one told Elvis, was that Gladys had been conscious for nearly an hour before she died. Conscious and talking to her hospital roommate, a woman named Dorothy Mitchell, whose granddaughter would grow up hearing stories about the night Elvis Presley's mother died. Stories about what Gladys really said in those final moments. Stories about the confession that would change everything. Dorothy Mitchell was 34 years old when they wheeled her into the bed next to Gladys Presley at Methodist Hospital. Dorothy was there for gallbladder surgery. Routine, boring, the kind of hospital stay that would normally fade from memory within months. But nothing about sharing a room with Elvis Presley's dying mother would ever be routine. Dorothy had followed Elvis's career like millions of other women. She'd bought his records, watched him on Ed Sullivan, felt that flutter in her chest when he moved his hips and smiled that crooked smile. But seeing Gladys Presley in that hospital bed stripped away every bit of glamour from the Elvis Presley story. This wasn't the mother of a king. This was a broken woman, rail-thin and shaking, her eyes darting around the room like she was seeing things that weren't there. Her hands moved constantly, picking at the bedsheets, touching her face, reaching for pills that weren't on the nightstand anymore. "They took my medicine," Gladys whispered to Dorothy during their first night as roommates. "They don't understand. I need my medicine." Dorothy had seen addiction before. Her own brother had come back from the war hooked on morphine, and she recognized the signs. The sweating, the paranoia, the desperate need for something to make the world make sense again. But this was different. This was Elvis Presley's mother, dying in a charity ward bed because the drugs had ravaged her body so completely that wealth couldn't fix what they'd broken. "What kind of medicine?" Dorothy asked gently. Gladys's laugh was bitter, hollow. "The kind that's supposed to help you lose weight and keep up with your son's success. The kind that promises to solve all your problems and ends up becoming the only problem you have left." Over the next 3 days, as Gladys slipped in and out of consciousness, Dorothy became the unwilling keeper of secrets that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Gladys told her about the first prescription 6 months earlier. Just diet pills, Dr. Clark had said. Safe, effective. All the Hollywood stars were using them. She'd lost 15 pounds in 2 weeks and felt more energetic than she had in years. But the energy came with a price. Sleep became impossible. Food became irrelevant. Reality became negotiable. "I started seeing things," Gladys confessed during one of her lucid moments. "Fans climbing the walls outside the house. Reporters hiding in the trees. I knew it wasn't real, but the fear felt real. So I took more pills to make the fear go away." The cycle had consumed her completely. More pills to stay awake. Different pills to fall asleep. Pills to eat. Pills to think, pills to function. Until she wasn't Gladys Presley anymore, she was just a collection of chemical needs wearing her face. Vernon knew. He had to know. He was the one driving her to those doctor appointments, paying for prescriptions that kept multiplying, watching his wife disappear one pill at a time. But Vernon was scared, Gladys told Dorothy. Scared that if Elvis found out his mama was a drug addict, it would destroy everything we'd built. All that success, all that money, all those dreams, gone because Elvis's mama couldn't handle being Elvis's mama. Dorothy wanted to call someone, tell someone, get help. But who do you call when Elvis Presley's mother is confessing to prescription drug addiction in 1958? Who would believe it? Who would care about anything except protecting America's golden boy? On August 13th, Gladys took a turn for the worse. The hepatitis that was the official reason for her hospitalization was real, but it wasn't what was killing her. Her heart was racing at nearly 200 beats per minute, her liver was shutting down from months of amphetamine abuse, and her kidneys were failing under the toxic load. Dr. Clark came by that evening, checked her chart, and spoke to Vernon in the hallway outside the room. Dorothy couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language. Decisions were being made. Stories were being agreed upon. The official narrative was being written while the real story died in the bed next to her. That's when Gladys asked Dorothy to come closer. "I need you to remember something," Gladys whispered, her voice barely audible above the monitors beeping around her bed. In case Elvis ever needs to know the truth." Dorothy leaned in, close enough to smell the chemical sweetness of whatever was leaving Gladys's body through her pores. "Tell him I said I'm sorry, not sorry for dying, we all die. Sorry for lying. Sorry for pretending the pills were helping when they were killing me. Sorry for choosing the easy answer instead of the brave one." Gladys gripped Dorothy's hand with surprising strength. "And tell him the pills I was taking, they're the same ones they're going to offer him. Tell him to run. Tell him what they did to his mama, they'll do to him too, unless he's stronger than I was." Those were the last coherent words Gladys Presley ever spoke. She slipped into a coma that night and died the following evening, her heart finally giving up the fight against the stimulants that had been racing through her system for months. Vernon told Elvis she died peacefully of natural causes. Dr. Clark signed the death certificate listing hepatitis and heart failure, with no mention of the prescription drugs that had actually killed her. The official story became the only story. Except Dorothy Mitchell remembered everything. She kept Gladys's secret for 19 years, carrying the weight of those final words like stones in her chest. She watched Elvis's career explode into global superstardom, watched him marry Priscilla, watched him struggle with his own demons, and wondered if she should speak up. But what could she say? That Elvis Presley's mother died of a drug overdose in 1958, that his father had covered it up, that the king of rock and roll needed to know his mama was an addict. Dorothy Mitchell was a nobody from Nebraska. Elvis Presley was the most famous man on earth. Who would listen to her story? Who would believe her word against the Presley family's official version of events? So she stayed quiet, until 1975, when her granddaughter Sarah turned 17 and Dorothy realized she was dying of cancer. The secret was eating her alive, and if she didn't pass it on, Gladys's final message to her son would die with her. Sarah Mitchell was a good kid, quiet, thoughtful, the kind of teenager who actually listened when adults talked about important things, so Dorothy told her everything, every word, every detail. Every moment from those 3 days when Elvis Presley's mother had used her as a confessor. "Someday," Dorothy told Sarah, "you might meet him, Elvis, and if you do, you'll know what his mother wanted him to hear, what she needed him to understand." Dorothy Mitchell died 6 months later, taking most of her secrets to the grave, but not all of them. Sarah carried her grandmother's final mission like a sacred trust. She followed Elvis's career, bought his records, watched his movies, and waited for a chance that might never come. By 1977, Elvis was clearly struggling. The jumpsuit couldn't hide his weight gain. The sunglasses couldn't hide the exhaustion in his eyes. The performances were still magical, but there was desperation underneath the magic, the desperate energy of a man running from something he couldn't name. Sarah recognized that desperation. She'd heard her grandmother describe it 19 years earlier, lying in a hospital bed next to Elvis's dying mother. So when Elvis announced a concert in Rapid City, just 600 miles from Sarah's home in Nebraska. She knew this was her moment. She made a sign with 5 words that would mean everything to Elvis and nothing to anyone else. For Gladys's son. She drove through the night to deliver a message from a dead woman to her dying son. A message about pills and lies and the price of choosing easy answers over brave ones. A message that would shatter Elvis Presley's understanding of everything he thought he knew about love, loss, and the woman who had meant more to him than life itself. July 3, 1977, 9:47 p.m. The exact moment Elvis Presley's world collapses for the second time in his life. Sarah Mitchell's lips are barely touching Elvis's ear when she whispers the 7 words that will haunt him forever. "Your mama said run from the pills." Elvis goes rigid. Every muscle in his 260-pound body freezes like he's been struck by lightning. The microphone slips from his hand and hits the stage with a metallic crash that echoes through the silent arena. For 10 seconds that feel like 10 hours, Elvis Presley stands motionless in front of 8,000 people, processing words that don't make sense but somehow explain everything. Then the sobs come. Not the controlled emotion of a performer who knows his audience is watching. This is raw, primal grief, the sound of a man realizing that his entire understanding of his life's greatest tragedy was built on lies. Elvis doubles over like he's been punched in the stomach, his hands covering his face, his shoulders shaking with each gasping breath. The white jumpsuit with its golden eagles and studs suddenly looks like a costume worn by a broken child playing dress-up. The band stops playing. Charlie Hodge, Elvis's longtime friend and stage companion, approaches cautiously, unsure whether this is part of the show or the beginning of a complete breakdown. "Elvis," Charlie whispers, "Boss, you okay?" Elvis straightens up slowly, his face streaked with tears and mascara, his eyes wild with a mixture of grief and rage that terrifies everyone close enough to see it clearly. He looks at Sarah Mitchell, still standing beside him on stage, and asks the question that will define his final 42 days. "What else did she say?" Sarah's voice trembles as she continues. "She said the same pills that killed her would come for you too. She said to tell you she was sorry for lying, sorry for pretending they helped when they were killing her. She said you needed to be stronger than she was." The arena is so quiet you can hear individual conversations in the back rows. 8,000 people watching Elvis Presley receive a message from his dead mother through a 19-year-old stranger. Elvis nods slowly, like pieces of a puzzle are finally clicking into place. The pills, the doctors, the way Vernon always seemed uncomfortable when medical conversations started, the way everyone around him treated his prescription drug use like a necessary evil instead of a growing catastrophe. "How do you know this?" Elvis asks, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying to every corner of the building. "My grandmother was her roommate, Dorothy Mitchell. She held your mama's hand when she died." Elvis's legs give out. He sits down hard on the edge of the stage, his feet dangling over the orchestra pit like a child on a dock. The king of rock and roll, reduced to a broken man in a sequined jumpsuit, trying to process the truth about his mother's death while thousands of strangers watch. "She really said that, about the pills?" Sarah nods, tears streaming down her own face now. "She made my grandmother promise to tell you if she ever got the chance. Grandma carried that secret for 19 years before she told me. She died believing she'd failed your mama by never finding you." Elvis looks out at the audience, all those faces staring back at him with confusion and concern, and that hungry curiosity that comes with witnessing someone else's private devastation in public. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elvis says into the microphone Charlie has retrieved for him, "I need to. I can't. We're gonna have to call it a night." The building erupts in concerned murmurs. People paid good money to see Elvis Presley perform, not watch him have an emotional breakdown. But something in his voice, something raw and desperate and human, stops anyone from booing or demanding their money back. Elvis helps Sarah down from the stage, his hands shaking as he guides her toward the wings. "Can you come backstage, please? I need to know everything," she said. What happens next unfolds like a car crash in slow motion, inevitable and devastating and impossible to look away from. Backstage at the Rapid City Civic Center, Elvis sits in his dressing room across from Sarah Mitchell while his entire entourage hovers nervously in the hallway. Red West, Sonny West, Joe Esposito, Charlie Hodge, all the men who have protected Elvis from everything except the truth about his own life. "Tell me exactly what she said," Elvis demands. "Every word." Sarah repeats her grandmother's story, but now she adds the details that couldn't be shared on stage. How Gladys shook constantly in that hospital bed. How she begged for pills that the doctors had taken away. How she confessed to taking amphetamines for months, escalating doses that had destroyed her heart and liver. "She said Vernon knew," Sarah continues. "She said he was scared that if you found out she was using drugs, it would ruin everything you'd built." Elvis's face goes white. Not pale, white like paper, like all the blood has drained from his head at once. "Vernon," he whispers, "that son of a bitch knew." For the first time since his mother's death, Elvis sees the pattern clearly. The way Vernon had always handled his medical care. The way prescriptions seemed to appear and multiply without Elvis really understanding how or why. The way his father treated Elvis's pill use as inevitable rather than preventable. The same system that killed Gladys had been transferred to her son. "Where's my daddy?" Elvis asks Red West. "He's back in Memphis, boss. Why?" Elvis stands up so fast his chair tips over backward. "Get him on the phone, now, and get me Dr. Nick, and get me Colonel Parker. I want all of them here tomorrow." The drive back to Memphis takes Elvis 6 hours through the night, his mind racing faster than the speedometer on his Stutz Blackhawk. Every prescription bottle in his medicine cabinet suddenly looks different. Every doctor visit feels suspicious. Every concerned conversation about his health problems now sounds like people managing his decline rather than fighting it. By the time Elvis walks through Graceland's front door at 4 a.m. on July 4, 1977, he's not the same man who left for South Dakota 3 days earlier. That man trusted his family, his doctors, his inner circle to have his best interests at heart. This man knows that the people closest to him have been carrying on his mother's death sentence, one prescription at a time. The confrontation with Vernon happens in Elvis's office, behind closed doors, with voices raised loud enough that the entire household can hear the king of rock and roll screaming at his father for the first time in his adult life. "You knew," Elvis shouts. "You knew what killed her, and you let them give me the same damn pills." Vernon's response is exactly what you'd expect from a man who spent 19 years living with the guilt of his wife's death and his son's parallel destruction. "I was trying to protect you, son. I was trying to protect the family." "Protect me?" Elvis's voice cracks with disbelief. "You were protecting the money. You were protecting your own guilt. You let me spend 19 years thinking I failed her when you knew she was dying the same way I'm dying." The truth is out now, spreading through Graceland like wildfire. The staff whispers about raised voices and broken furniture. The Memphis Mafia exchanges worried glances about what Elvis might do with this knowledge. Because Elvis Presley, armed with the truth about his mother's death, isn't just a grieving son anymore. He's a man who understands that his own death has been orchestrated by the people who claim to love him most. And he's got 42 days to figure out whether he's strong enough to break the cycle that killed Gladys Presley, or whether Sarah Mitchell's warning came too late to save Elvis from following his mother to the grave. July 5, 1977. Elvis Presley sits in the meditation garden at Graceland, staring at his mother's grave with eyes that have barely closed in 48 hours. In his hand, he holds a bottle of Dilaudid, enough pills to put him to sleep forever or to flush down the toilet and start the hardest fight of his life. For the first time since Sarah Mitchell whispered those 7 words, Elvis is alone. No handlers, no doctors, no family members hovering with concerned expressions and helpful suggestions. Just Elvis and Gladys and the truth that's burning through his chest like acid. "I know what you were trying to tell me, Mama," he whispers to the marble headstone. "I know why you were so scared. They're doing to me exactly what they did to you." The pills in his hand rattle like dice. A gamble between life and death, between the easy path and the impossible one. Elvis has spent the last 2 days firing people. Dr. Nick dismissed with a phone call that lasted exactly 30 seconds. Vernon told to stay away from Graceland until further notice. Colonel Parker informed that their contract would be terminated if he ever showed his face on the property again. The Memphis Mafia is scattered, some loyal to Elvis, others loyal to the payroll that keeps their families fed. For the first time in 20 years, Elvis Presley is truly alone with his demons. And his demons are hungry. The withdrawal starts on day 3. Not just from the pills, but from the entire system that had been managing his life since he was barely more than a teenager. Without Vernon handling his business, without Dr. Nick managing his medications, without Colonel Parker booking his schedule, Elvis has to face something he hasn't confronted since 1956. Who is he when he's not performing Elvis Presley? The answer is terrifying. He's a 42-year-old man who can't sleep without chemical assistance, who can't face a crowd without pharmaceutical courage, who has spent so many years being managed that he's forgotten how to manage himself. But Sarah Mitchell's grandmother made Gladys a promise, and that promise is keeping Elvis alive 1 hour at a time. On July 10th, Elvis calls Sarah directly. He gets her number from directory assistants in Nebraska and dials it himself, something he hasn't done in years. "I need to know more," he tells her. "I need to know everything your grandmother remembered." What Sarah tells him during that 2-hour phone call changes everything. Dorothy Mitchell hadn't just witnessed Gladys's confession, she'd researched it. After Gladys died, Dorothy spent months learning about amphetamine addiction, reading medical journals, talking to doctors who would speak honestly about what those pills actually did to the human body. "My grandmother said your mama's heart was running at 200 beats per minute when she died," Sarah explains. "She said the doctors knew it was the pills, but they were more afraid of the scandal than they were committed to the truth." Elvis listens to every word, taking notes like a man studying for the most important exam of his life. Because in a way, he is. The real revelation comes when Sarah mentions the other patients her grandmother met over the years. Hollywood stars, musicians, wealthy housewives, all following the same prescription path that had killed Gladys Presley. All of them dying of heart failure or complications, while their real cause of death was buried in medical files and covered up by families desperate to protect reputations. "Grandma said it was like an epidemic that nobody wanted to name," Sarah continues. "Rich people dying of poor people's problems, but with expensive doctors and better cover stories." Elvis realizes he's not just fighting for his own life. He's fighting against a system that has been killing people like him for decades. Famous people whose deaths get explained away while their real stories die with them. That night, Elvis makes a decision that will define his legacy in ways he doesn't yet understand. He starts writing, not songs but letters, detailed accounts of every prescription he's been given, every doctor who's enabled his addiction, every family member who's profited from his decline. He documents the whole conspiracy, from Gladys's death in 1958 to his own near death in 1977. The letters are addressed to investigators, journalists, anyone who might care about the truth after he's gone. Because Elvis understands something now that he didn't understand before Sarah's whispered warning. He might not survive this fight. The pills have been in his system too long, the damage too extensive. But even if he loses the battle for his own life, he can still win the war for his mother's memory. For 2 weeks, Elvis fights harder than he's ever fought for anything. He attends Narcotics Anonymous meetings in Memphis, disguised behind sunglasses and false names. He hires new doctors who specialize in addiction rather than enablement. He restructures his entire financial situation to remove the people who profit from his pharmaceutical dependence. Most importantly, he calls Sarah Mitchell every few days, drawing strength from her grandmother's message and her own encouragement. "You're doing what your mama wanted," Sarah tells him during their last conversation on August 14, 1977. "You're being stronger than she was." But strength isn't always enough to overcome years of systematic poisoning. Elvis Presley dies on August 16, 1977, in the bathroom at Graceland. The official cause of death becomes cardiac arrhythmia, a heart attack. Just like his mother, the real story gets buried beneath medical terminology and family protection of reputation. But this time there's a difference. This time someone prepared for the cover-up. The letters Elvis wrote during his final weeks were hidden throughout Graceland, with copies sent to safety deposit boxes in 3 different states. Instructions left with his will specified that the letters should be opened if anyone ever questioned the official story of his death. Sarah Mitchell received one of those letters, postmarked August 15, 1977, the day before Elvis died. "Thank you for giving me my mama's words," the letter read. "Thank you for telling me the truth when everyone else was lying. I don't know if I'm strong enough to beat this thing, but I'm strong enough to make sure the truth doesn't die with me. Today, Sarah Mitchell is 65 years old. She works as an addiction counselor in Nebraska, helping people fight the same demons that killed Elvis and his mother. She still has that letter, along with recordings of their phone conversations that document Elvis's struggle to break free from the system that destroyed him. She's never sold those recordings, never written a book, never cashed in on her connection to the most famous man in the world. Because some truths are more important than money. And sometimes, keeping a promise to a dying woman is more valuable than fame. Sarah Mitchell still carries the weight of those final conversations with Elvis, wondering if her grandmother's message gave him peace or torment in his last days. Did Elvis die knowing his mother truly loved him, or did the truth about her addiction destroy his final weeks? What do you think? Was Sarah right to deliver that devastating message, or should some family secrets stay buried forever? Share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more untold stories that reveal the human side of our greatest legends.